Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 210, cover dated October 1986. So an iconic cover here by John Romita Jr., another iconic cover of his from his run, his first run on the X-Men, and he's inked here by Bob Wiacek, and we have the X-Men looking pretty tough on this cover. But if you zero in on Nightcrawler, you'll see that he is pretty busted up here. He's got a broken nose, he's got blood trickling from his nose, he's got a black eye here, or a busted cheek. His uniform is ripped to shreds. So really what's happening on this cover, you know, the caption kind of makes you think the X-Men are just posing and looking tough, but they're actually surrounding Nightcrawler here, and they're protecting him. So that's what's going on. That's the little story in the cover. We don't exactly see this scene within the comic itself, although Nightcrawler is found after having been blasted and severely injured, and the X-Men wondering what became of him when he was blasted by Nimrod and teleported away, and whether he was dead or not. And Kitty Pryde is involved in Nightcrawler's rescue. So kind of a little bit of a reversal for Nightcrawler, who is the one who in issue 204 was the one rescuing a damsel in distress, and he himself is in need of rescue in this issue. So let's open this one up, and here we have our almost splash page here. The setting is Los Angeles, California, the city of angels and devils, as the narrative caption says. And so this particular issue is bookended by the story of this character here called Tommy. She's a Morlock. We'll see what her power is shortly. And it begins in medias res. So this is a Hellfire soldier mercenary who is harpooned in the back here. And we're in the middle of things. We don't really know what's happened before this. But just before I move on to the next page, let's look at our creative team here. Chris Claremont, writer. John Romita Jr. and Dan Green, artists. So remember, Romita Jr. is prevented from doing full pencils on his first run on X-Men, and Dan Green is finishing his art, and Romita Jr. wasn't very happy with that. And this is the last collaboration between the pair on that first run. It is also John Romita Jr.'s second last issue of that original run. And then we've got Glynis Oliver, colorist, and Tom Orzechowski, letterer. So title of the story is The Morning After. So this picks up immediately when we get to the X-Men, the morning after the battle in Central Park with the Hellfire, the Lords Cardinal of the Hellfire Club, and Nimrod. So this character here, his name is Richard Salmons, age 27. He was good at his job, an ambitious young man with splendid prospects. Now those dreams are dust. His sole concern is survival. So Claremont always very good at that, like giving little human backstories to bit part characters in his X-Men stories. And so we feel a little bit for this guy as he's trying to get to his gun, and he's together with this Morlock girl, and he asks her, please, together we have a chance. Together we can still beat the odds. You run on your own, we're both done. And she's too scared. She runs away, and we get from her thought balloons what's going on with her. I'm so far from home, she thinks. I don't know this city. No tunnels like under Manhattan. Nowhere to hide. I thought it would be such a great adventure wandering across the whole country. Who's after me? Why do they want to kill me? I don't want to die, she thinks. And then we go back to Richard injured on the tracks there, and then this character steps on his hand just as he's about to reach for his gun, and puts a gun to the side of his head, and says, when Richard says, your mistake, kill me, my employer's Hellfire Club will pay you back in kind. They're welcome to try, says this guy. They'll get the same as you. And then we switch to Tommy, and she hears the gunshot that's blown his head off. And who are these mysterious figures in silhouette? Well, we're going to learn who they are exactly at the end of the issue. When we pick up with Tommy again, she's getting aboard this train that is going to take her back to New York. And then the scene switches to San Francisco, and we've got Ali here, Alison Blair. So she has dyed her hair brunette, and she is part of Lila. She's hanging out with and playing with Lila Cheney's band, Incognito. And interesting little thought balloon from her. So she's here with the band members, and they're packing up their gear, and one of them asks her, does she need a hand? And she says she can manage. And then she thinks, one of the nicer byproducts of being a mutant. So this is something that was established by Claremont, that any mutant has somewhat greater physical strength than ordinary human beings. Not something often referenced, but here it is getting referenced in Ali's thought balloon. And she's a bit, she wants some time by herself, and I think this guy again, Connell, says to her, you're not a solo act anymore, Alison, you're part of a group. You can't keep acting like an outsider. But she insists that she's bushed. She wants to be left alone and to take a hint and leave her be. So she gets into the band mobile bus, tour bus, and she goes into the bathroom and checks herself out in the mirror, and she's thinking about how, you know, that she owes Lila so much, but she hates owing anyone anything, and she thinks she needed so badly to make it on her own. And just as she's thinking all this, she suddenly sees this bizarre reflection of herself in the mirror. And the reflection says, I'm Malice, Alison, I'm you. So this is the first appearance of Malice from the Marauders. And of course she is appearing to Ali in the physical guise of Ali's like former Disco Dazzler persona, and grabs her by the throat. And Ali lashes out with her mutant powers, get away. And then she comes to in the corner of the cramped bathroom, and she looks at herself and thinks, reflection's normal. An hallucination then. Had to be. I mean, demons popping out of a mirror, give me a break. So she puts it down to exhaustion, and then she catches sight of the choker around her neck. I like this choker, just my style. And then she heads to bed. So she wasn't wearing the choker before this incident, and that's just the way that Malice operates. The choker around Ali's neck indicates that she has been possessed by Malice. And then we go back to New York, Manhattan, and we've got Rogue flying around, and her costume is ripped from the night before. She's out on Storm's orders, looking around for Rachel, and feeling guilty. Poor kid, it's partly my fault she's gone, she thinks, as she flies by the silhouetted twin towers. And she thinks, I've been an outcast. I know what it's like to be all alone without friends to turn to. But when Phoenix Rachel needed me, she turned away. So feeling guilty there. And then an unexpected bit of action. So we've got this window washing scaffold falling down on the side of one of these skyscrapers. And Rogue flies into heroic action. She grabs the scaffold, makes sure it doesn't fall on anyone on the street, throws it into the river, and catches the window washers, who think they're about to die, but she catches them just in time. And I really like Glynis Oliver's colouring choice here. The magenta background really makes the panel pop. And so she drops them down to earth. Love kind of Claremont's indication of all the crowd reaction to what's happened. Did you see what a feat, what a body, she an Avenger, a mutie, and so on and so forth. And this guy's just delighted that he's alive. And the one of the window washers, this guy, has basically fallen in love with his rescuer, and he offers her a kiss. But of course, Rogue can't have any kisses, because the instant anyone's flesh touches hers, she absorbs their psyche and that person drops unconscious. So then she catches sight of herself in one of the gleaming facades of one of the skyscrapers, sees she looks dreadful, as she thinks herself utter and complete ragbag. And so she thinks it's time to deal with that. So where does she go? She heads off to Bloomingdale's, and we learn that in her thought balloon that she always carries a cash stash hidden in her belt. So there she goes to Bloomingdale's, and she's trying on all these different dresses and skirts and fashion combos. The height of mid-80s fashion with the big shoulder pads. And so she's got all her packages there, and then she looks for a makeover on her face. Quite a lot of rouge there. And this guy pops up in the shop and basically says, calls her out as a mutie. You don't belong in a decent store, he says, among decent human people. And Rogue is basically cool and calm about all of this. She asks the makeup woman to try another shade of lipstick, and the guy just insists on coming up and saying he's going to call X Factor. And this is interesting because up to this point, more or less, Claremont had ignored the existence of X Factor, but now that his friend and former editor Louise Simonson has taken over writing X Factor, he is starting to acknowledge its existence within the realm of his own X-Men comic. So what happens here is the window washer from earlier, he has followed Rogue to Bloomingdale's, taps the guy on the shoulder, and is about to get into it with him in defense of the woman who rescued him. And then the clerk, this is hilarious, gets in the middle of it all, and she says, "Don't you dare fight in here, this is Bloomingdale's." So the horror of a fight breaking out in Bloomingdale's. And then Rogue disappears. She uses the distraction to head on her way with her shopping bags and her new costume here, designed by John Romita Jr. And she catches sight for the first time of an ad for X Factor, doesn't recognize Scott Summers there. And then we go back to the X Mansion, and we've got this little reunion between Colossus and his sister Illyana. Colossus has gone back to wearing his Cockrum designed costume, the original giant size X-Men costume, and he says it's because all his new ones are ruined, so he's back in his original colors. And then Illyana's been going through his sketchbook. She sees that he's still maybe got some feelings for Kitty, and Illyana says, you know, Kitty needs some help from her friends because it's like the X-Men, maybe the whole world is falling to pieces around her, and Colossus thinks around us all. I like this three-quarter side profile of Colossus here, looking very kind of contemplative and worried, and we're going to see a very different looking Colossus a little later on. I'll point it out when we get to it, but this looks like him. This other image doesn't look so much like him when we get there. And then we pick up with the girl herself, Kitty. She's working on Cerebro, using her powers here to phase into the hardware of Cerebro. And what she's up to is she's adding new circuitry that alters Cerebro's operational parameters so that any of the X-Men can use it to scan for mutants, where before only psi sensitives could. So they're going to use this upgrade to scan for Nightcrawler and Rachel. And like this little funny bit with Lockheed on her head and just licking her nose there with his big long tongue. And then in comes Colossus and Illyana. And basically what they are interrupted in their conversation by is Cerebro's alarm going off, a contact alarm. And one of the missing teammates has been spotted. So who is it? Is it Nightcrawler? Is it Rachel? And then we pick up in an alley off Fifth Avenue where Magneto arrives. And we get this interesting account of how his uniform is transformed into a suit. We're told in narrative caption, the fabric of his costume is a special metal fiber, comfortable as cloth, resilient as body armor, easily transformed by his mutant power into something less conspicuous. So then outside of one of the houses on Fifth Avenue, there is a crowd and the police are there, and it turns out that X Factor are there, and they're picking up the pieces after a battle in Central Park the previous night. And the police chief there is thanking them for showing up. Doesn't know they're mutants, of course. And Jean Grey, or who is it that basically Cyclops asks the police chief, why didn't you summon the Avengers? Their headquarters is right down the street. And he responds, don't trust them. I'd rather deal with real human beings rather than any lousy muties. And Jean says, but they're not mutants, they're super beings. And the guy basically says, what's the difference? So interesting little perspective there on, you know, that double standard in the Marvel Universe in terms of how the X-Men are regarded versus the Avengers, even though they're all superpowered beings. So the prejudice is a racial prejudice when it comes to mutants is clarified here. And then who is it that is observing all of this except Magneto? And he's watching from behind this tree. And basically he recognizes who X Factor is. Cyclops, Beast, Angel, Iceman. And the woman must be Cyclops' wife, Madeline Pryor. So Magneto knows nothing about Jean Grey's rebirth from Jamaica Bay, from the cocoon under Jamaica Bay. And also X Factor recognize Magneto too. But as Cyclops says, the crowd is too big to do anything about it. So as he concludes, we'll wait and watch, let him make the next move. So nice little moment here, having, you know, our original lineup from X-Men #1, 1963, and their villain Magneto watching each other in completely different guises, with so much history having gone by, and yet that impulse, that instinct to regard each other as enemies and with suspicion, especially from X Factor, the original X-Men. Anyway, Magneto continues with his purpose, which is to go enter the Hellfire Club, and he has a meeting with the Lords Cardinal in the underground chambers beneath the club. So we've got here a dais with a table and 4 top chairs. So we've got Sebastian Shaw, we've got Emma Frost, and we've got Celine, and we've got Tessa there indicated in the background. So Shaw explains the Hellfire Club is composed of the richest, most powerful men and women in the world, but within the club is a secret, elite inner circle, a cabal if you will, whose ambition it is to rule the world. We Lords Cardinal rule the circle. So a lot of words on this page. This is a very dense issue, and basically Shaw's holding out an invitation to Magneto and the X-Men to take up the empty chair of the White King as within the inner circle. Excuse me. So Shaw says, we invite you, Magneto, to claim it for yourself alone, or if you will, in the name of your precious X-Men. And of course Magneto thinks they're joking because of what happened the night before with the fight in Central Park. But Shaw explains, and he says, when faced with a common foe, we set aside those fundamental differences and work together for our mutual survival. That was in the face of Nimrod. This morning is much the same. Look outside at the crowd, at that accursed X Factor. Something deadly is in the wind, and we mutants can no longer afford any form of internecine warfare. By our very nature, we are branded outcasts from humanity, the X-Men more so. Your courage, your heroics go unsung. You must hide from the very people you defend. The Lords Cardinal offer sanctuary and the full protection of our considerable powers. Refuse and, for our own survival, we will not lift a finger to aid you in yours. So Magneto basically says he needs some time to think. It's a tempting offer, and he'll go away and consider it. So interesting here, this acknowledgement of the necessity of former and long-standing enemies to join in some kind of alliance against a greater threat, the threat of prejudice directed at mutants of whatever stripe. And then we switch to a derelict Hudson River warehouse, and there's a crowd after a mutant, and who will it turn out to be except for Nightcrawler? And this is a callback to our very first introduction to Nightcrawler in Giant Size X-Men #1, when he was hunted by a baying mob, but in Germany, and was rescued by Professor X. And he's injured here and unable to teleport. And overhead he's lucky because he's the mutant identified by Cerebro. And so Colossus, Illyana, and Kitty arrive by one of Illyana's portals. And Colossus opens the roof, or the roof is fallen in so they can see. And he jumps down and decides to actually reason with the mob. So a very interesting decision here. Instead of turning into his armored form and frightening them away, he decides to reason with them. And he says, "Why are you chasing this man? Is he a criminal?" And this guy in the crowd says, "He's worse than any crook. He's a mutie." And Colossus says, "And is that cause to hunt him like some animal, to beat him to death?" And Kitty jumps in and joins Colossus and says, "Hey mister, who defines what's human? It's obvious, girl, just open your eyes. That simple, huh?" And then she says, "Well, a whole chunk of my family was murdered in gas chambers because the Nazis said it was just as obvious that Jews weren't human. And not so long ago in this country, people felt the same way about blacks. Some still do. Is that right?" And this guy comes forward and says, "He scared my kids." And she says, "You scare me. Does that give me the right to beat your brains out? You want to prove how big and tough and brave you are? Beat up on me," she says. "Come on, what are you waiting for?" He's got nothing to say to that. And she says, "You're bigger than me and I'm just a girl, but maybe I'm a mutie too. Ever think of that? Maybe we all are." And of course the irony is, the truth is that they are. And this woman basically interrupts, and she says, "You shouldn't talk to your elders, you shouldn't talk so to your elders, young lady." And Kitty responds, "I don't, to those I respect." And she turns her back on them, and she whispers to Illyana, "What's happening? I don't want to look." And they're going. So it worked. So this potentially lethal situation was solved by reason, by words. So there's some hope there. And here's this very odd kind of looking Colossus. He looks more like Peter Parker here. So I'm not sure what's going on or why this has happened here, but it's a strange one. Let me know in the comments what you think about this, what's happening here. It does not look like Colossus to me. It looks like Peter Parker. And then we're back with Nightcrawler, and he looks like he has been through the wars. And Kitty asks him, "Why didn't he teleport away when he was being chased?" And he says, "He couldn't. I seem to have lost my power." So that's going to play out for quite some time in Nightcrawler's case. It's going to take him a long time to recover from those injuries inflicted on him by Nimrod. And then we pick up back in Central Park. We've got Storm and Wolverine at the point that Rachel's scent disappears. The trail ends in the Delacorte Theatre. And Storm, with some screen tone here, asks Wolverine, "You say she's lost, Wolverine?" "She's gone, boss," he responds, "where the X-Men can't follow. Is there nothing we can do?" And Wolverine acknowledges he figures he did enough, drawing in his claws. But he still tries to justify himself. "She was trying to murder the Black Queen. Should I have left her?" "It should never have come to that," says Storm. "The X-Men are a team, Logan." And she continues, "And if we are a team, my friend, and I am its leader, I must have your trust and when required your obedience." And he responds interesting here with his hand out. "All my life I've been a loner." "Then walk away," she says to him, "before more harm is done. We cannot afford a next time. The stakes have grown too high. We depend on you, Wolverine. You must be there." "I will," he says, "to the end." And they hold hands. It's a very cool moment here between them, in terms of the raising of the stakes, in terms of Aurora asserting her authority here, and you know, it's not just a hierarchical thing. They're friends. They're a team. And now we get to the other end of this book-ending story of Tommy and her return to New York. And she's got this strange power where she can fold herself flat, and this is the way she slips out of the baggage car onto the ground of the tracks, and she descends down into the Morlock tunnels. She thinks there's no way those creeps could have followed her, that she's safe, but oh no, she catches one of these harpoons in the back, and she's stunned. And the silhouette says, "You figure we're chumps, girl. Should have listened to your Hellfire Club boyfriend. He had it pegged. Together you had a chance. Alone, too bad. So who are these people? We let you go," this guy says, "so you'd lead us to your fellow Morlocks. No hard feelings, nothing's personal. It's our job. We're pros, the best." And he racks his shotgun. "Marauders. Don't feel sad, youngster, because where you're going, you'll soon have lots of company." And then boom, all the way down the tunnel. Great lettering by Orzechowski. She's dead. The Marauders are down in the Morlock tunnels. So this, in effect, now is the prologue to Mutant Massacre, as the final caption in respect of the next issue promises a massacre. So there you go. I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on Uncanny X-Men 210. If you did, please like the video. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.